Tom, I have to say I've been enjoying watching The Night Manager, and
Thank you.
Your character is Jonathan Pine, is this combination of vulnerable, dangerous, sexy, and incredibly enigmatic. When you first saw the material, what was your response to this character?
The first response was actually about recognition, strangely. I could see it was a very immediate gut instinct of wanting to say yes, wanting to do it, wanting to play him. I can't explain why, really. I related to his privacy, I related to his solitude, I related to his courage and his anger, and actually I found it deeply romantic. It's a very romantic story about a sort of errant knight who is looking for a cause.
Is he lost in the beginning?
I think so. I think he's disillusioned and he's disenchanted. And I think in order to deal with that, he's simply run away. He's buried himself in snow and silence, literally and figuratively. There are so many clues. There are so many clues in the novel. There are so many clues, I hope, in the screenplay about his former life as a soldier. When Olivia Colman's character challenges him about why he's chosen to take a step towards.
Well, he's taking a step towards something very dangerous.
Very dangerous. And she says why, and she challenges him on it, and he's reluctant to talk about it. And it's, to my mind, the center of it. I think a lot of it should remain mysterious, a lot of Pine's motivation. Some of it is about guilt, some of it is about revenge, some of it is about a kind of moral rage. But so much of it is informed by his history as a soldier. Is that Richard Roper, played by Hugh Laurie, trades in standard and chemical weapons, selling British and American certified weapons and arms to the highest bidder, and has divorced himself from the consequences of the violence from which he profits. Jonathan Pine was a soldier in the Second Iraq War of 2003. He knows what those weapons can do to a body. He also knows that the very premise of that war was predicated on the existence of the weapons of the worst kind. I think that's a huge part of his center, his anger about that, his disillusionment. And ultimately, the thing I find romantic about it, in the biggest sense, is that he is courageous enough to stand up against the face of evil. There's the Edmund Burke quotation, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. And Pine does something.
John le Carré wrote the book on which it's based, and it's been updated by David Farr and directed by Susanna Bier throughout all 6 episodes. So you were working with one set of people. You didn't have that experience that television so often has. Was that important to you?
It never, oddly, didn't feel like television, I think, in that regard. It felt like a 6-hour film. It felt like it was a 360-page script. We shot it and we boarded it as one. It wasn't episodic. We would, on a Tuesday morning we'd be shooting a scene from episode 5, and then on a Tuesday afternoon we'd shoot episode 2. So the command over the material that both Susanna and I had to have was substantial.
Well, because if you do it that way, it means you're out of sequence, you're jumping around,
of course,
continuity becomes, you had to stay focused.
Yeah, but it meant that also it felt very contained and complete, and it had its own integrity because it meant everyone working on it was involved from start to finish. If you were playing a character like Pine in a longer series with different directors and different writers, there might be a sense of a kind of solitude, that you're the only person actually taking this journey, but it never felt like that at all, because we were all the creative people involved were involved for the entire thing, and I think that's part of why it feels like it has an integrity to it, I think, because it's Susanna's film, really.
So you showed this to your sisters when you were trying to decide whether to make the film?
Well,
or the series?
yeah, I'd sort of already made the decision, but I read them a paragraph from very early in the novel. It's, I think, the opening of chapter 3, and it's an astonishing description of Jonathan Pine, and it goes like this. He's described as a graduate of a rainy archipelago of orphanages and foster homes, a sometime Army wolf child with a special unit, a itinerant chef, hotelier, volunteer, collector of other people's languages, perpetual escapee from emotional entanglement, self-exiled creature of the night, and sailor without a destination. And I recognized myself in that. And I read it to my sisters, and they just said, "Oh my God, it's you! Oh my God!" That is, I can slide myself into many of those roles. I'm not a hotelier, I should say, nor am I a very good chef, but I am and have been a collector of other people's languages. I may indeed be have been guilty as charged as a sailor without a destination at some points in my life. And it's a great.
How many languages do you speak?
I only speak Pidgin French and Spanish, and I read Latin and Greek at university. So there is some small, modest degree of linguistic ability.
You have been picking roles that are all over the place.
Yeah.
And so tell me where there's an overlap between Jonathan Pine and Hank Williams.
Great question. I think they are both characters which express something I think is true of life, and certainly true of me, which is that there is an exterior and an interior, and I think both characters, unconsciously or not, are perceived in the world in a particular way, but behind the facade is something much more turbulent and vulnerable. So Hank was this, incredibly charismatic performer, huge star, incredibly witty and generous of spirit as a performer, but actually I think it was hiding a lot of very complex, difficult emotions in his own life. And Jonathan Pine is the face of elegance and duty and modesty and self-discipline. But behind that uniform is something very chaotic, and he's on fire inside, and he's on fire with a kind of moral anger, but it's all covered by his immaculate presentation as a night manager. And it's not just true of those two characters. I just think it's true of life. I think we live in a very scrutinized world. We're all scrutinizing each other all the time, and everyone tries to put their best foot forward. The very essence of identity I find fascinating is that in order to lead constructive and happy lives, we try to be the best versions of ourselves, but there's a sometimes life doesn't make room for the bumps in the road. So those bumps in the road are internalized, and people go through very private turmoil, I believe.
And does that help you as an actor?
I think it's useful. I think I think vulnerability is what people access in cinema and in theatre. I think that is the power of those media, the power of cinema, the power of theatre, can bring people together by expressing truths about who we are and how we are, which are uneasy, which are so I think the things that we as audiences, you and I are drawn to stories which excavate the human condition in all of its complexity and fragility. And I think honestly that is, if cinema and theatre have any power, that's the power it has. It's as if to say, in any hero or heroine or anti-hero or villain, there's some exploration of ourselves going on there. I don't mean for that to sound highfalutin or pretentious. I just think when there are characters on screen or on stage that we relate to, it's because we can see them, we can see ourselves in them. That their struggles are our struggles. They're a character trying to keep a lid on his feelings or her feelings, a character trying to control his urges and instincts, is all of us trying to do that in our own way. That's what I think.
So I happened to be at Comic-Con when you did the great Loki speech.
Yes.
Women screaming in my ear. That was wonderful to witness.
It was huge fun. I don't think I'll ever have another moment like it. It was very rare because it was pure theatre in a way. It was
on a grand scale.
On a grand scale, and it was also
college.
but it was a character from cinema, from movies, becoming a live thing, and it was so interesting because you never get that. You know, an actor rarely gets a chance to portray a character they've played on screen on a stage, but also a specific kind of stage. And I enjoyed it so much because it was unrepeatable and there was no second take and nobody expected it. It was completely it was a surprise for everyone, and it was a surprise for me. I almost couldn't keep it together, actually. The sheer intensity of that energy coming towards me was something I had not expected. And the volume.
Of course it went viral.
Yeah,
and
it did.
You keep, I remember posting one of the romantic Shakespeare sonnets that you read.
Oh, really?
That went over very well. No, there are all these things out there. Doing the weather on your recent promo tour.
Yeah.
But you keep it light. You have fun with it.
Well, I take the work very seriously, and I don't take myself seriously. My sisters would tell you that. I can't help it. I think sometimes, in our world now, actors, there is a demand for context around the work, and so we all do these press tours all the time, and you just have to have as much fun as you can, because there's a limit to how much you can answer the same question. You know what I mean? And I have no dignity or vanity left, so I'll do.
Well, you're an actor who worked for a long time before you got your first break. Who got you your first break? Who made that possible?
It was Kenneth Branagh, if I'm honest. I had a very fulfilling career in the theatre in London, and I was doing some good work, I think, at the Donmar Warehouse and with Michael Grandage and his company, but I'd never had a chance on television or in film really I kept auditioning for big films and for television series, and I was, I just didn't make the grade. Somehow there was always a a financial decision that was made to cast established names, because that was, I think, that's just the way the business is structured, is that there's always an anxiety about unknowns. What have known, I mean, what is an unknown? I don't know, but it's what the business talks about people who don't have a track record, essentially. And I had no track record in television or film, except, I must say, the belief and investment of Joanna Hogg in two very small films that she made, called Unrelated and Archipelago. But Kenneth Branagh was the first person who made a big, he just did a very big thing, and he cast me as Loki in Thor, which was a huge studio film for Marvel and Paramount at the time. It was before Marvel was bought by Disney, and it's, you know, to be the lead villain in a film of that size, surrounded by huge talent in Sir Anthony Hopkins and Natalie Portman and Rene Russo. He cast me and Chris Hemsworth at the same time, and we both knew what it meant. It was a big thing, and I will always be grateful to him for that.
We got one more coming up.
I do.
Thor.
Yes, I do.
Ragnarok.
Ragnarok, yeah. Ragnarok, I think, in Norse mythology, is the end not just of the world or even the universe, but the end of all things. The end of time, the end of space, the end of matter as we know it. It's pretty. It's a big moment.
So you're going to tune up for duty.
I will, yeah.
And bring it again after 3 years.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting, because I can't think of another example where, as an actor, you play the same character when you have these breaks in a way. I don't know how it'll be different. I just know that it will be. It has to be. I'm 3 years older. I've done some things in between. We'll see. We'll see. And also, that character has such room for growth and complexity, because he's always walking this tightrope between a kind of latent mischief and malevolence and this capacity for redemption, which he has. You know,
you can have some fun with him. But the other, as tough as Hank Williams was, and you hadn't been a musician,
yeah.
You didn't know how to sing, you had to nail that southern country thing, which you did.
Thank you.
Some of these other parts have been hard too. Crimson Peak, where you're in this gothic universe.
Yeah.
With Guillermo del Toro.
Yeah, that was challenging because I think Thomas Sharp was he was inspired by the archetypes of Gothic romance. He was inspired by characters like Rochester and Heathcliff and Mr. Darcy to some extent. He was inspired by the performances of Peter Cushing. He was inspired by all the things that Guillermo loves. But I had to make him my own. I had to make him real. And to have him step out of those pages and feel like he had an emotional truth and an arc. I enjoyed it enormously. It's a film about freedom in lots of ways. Edith, Mia Wasikowska's character, is setting herself free, owning her own conviction as a woman. She makes her own decisions. She doesn't make her father's decisions. And Thomas, in his own way, has to set himself free from Lucille.
That's
and
right.
From the past. It's a film about kind of cutting ties with the past and taking possession of your future, which I think is very powerful, actually. Very powerful theme.
I love that movie. I wish more people. It sort of fell between the cracks of being a sort of genre horror movie and some kind of old-fashioned Gothic romance.
Gothic romance, yeah.
It would have been lovely if it could have gone more in that direction.
Yeah.
My feeling.
And I think Gothic romance became Gothic horror, which became horror. So there was always going to be a bleed, I think. I don't know, maybe people thought it was Halloween, so there'd be more ghosts in it.
Yeah, exactly. It was marketed that way. That's the thing, you know. And sometimes people are confused when they're reintroduced to a genre that they don't even recognize anymore. And then Only Lovers Left Alive, Jim Jarmusch, you and Tilda Swinton, deliciously. That was in the ruins of Detroit. In
Yes.
Great setting.
Yeah. I love making that, actually. I love Detroit. Such a rare thing in America to find a piece of America, because America is so young in terms of the history of the world.
Europe, yes.
It's such a young nation, and so America has no ruins in a way. And I'm not suggesting that Detroit is in ruins, but it is a city that people have left, and people may come back. And I must just add, I found the people of Detroit incredibly welcoming, incredibly warm. But just the history of the place, in terms of where it sits in the last century in the history of American culture, is so fascinating. And of course, Jim Jarmusch loves it, and the character that I played loves it too, because there's extraordinary beauty to the landscape, because these huge factories and this sort of monoliths of the auto industry are being reclaimed by nature. So there is a fascinating thing happening there.
And then there's a ruin of another kind in High Rise.
Yes,
We
yes.
watch the destruction
Yeah.
of a brand new, modern,
Yeah.
supposedly superior office structure. I mean,
Yeah.
housing structure. It's a crazy British movie. It's a hit over there, I understand.
It's found its audience in the UK, which is great, and it's good because I think it rattled some cages. It's very much about. There's a very British sense of humour inside it. I think people understand J.G. Ballard and the sort of his kind of surrealist social commentary that his books are about. It's great. It's really lovely to see it bloom in if that's the right word, at home. And I loved making it. I loved Ben. The combination of Ben Wheatley and J.G. Ballard and Jeremy Thomas I think was the reason I wanted to do it. And the film itself, I think, asks some very tough questions of the audience. But if you can access it, it's sort of digging around at something I find interesting. Again, I suppose it goes back to the tension between the exterior and the interior life. His Ballard is he takes a slice of middle-class society. They're all relatively well-to-do, dentists, gynecologists, filmmakers, actors, broadcasters. A physiologist, a doctor, a teacher in a medical school, and all these people who sort of fit into middle-class society. But he takes those superficial attributes away to reveal something darker and more unsettling. There's always that. What's that? We're all 3 meals away from anarchy or something. If you didn't feed people for a day, where would we be?
Indeed. In that movie, that's exactly what the movie is.
Yeah.
You get to all these people trashing. So it must have been fun to sort of realize that you by lending yourself to an indie project like that,
Yeah.
that you could help to get it made.
Yeah, I mean that's what I was told. Honestly, is that my attachment was that I was the first actor who to be involved, and that meant that Jeremy Thomas could take it to distributors and sales agents, and it released a certain portion of the funding, not all of it, but it actually it gets the wheels turning, and that's. I mean, my God, what a privilege to be in a place where I could choose something and that be part of why it gets greenlit.
You've been choosing very well, and you've been choosing. I mean, I think the night manager is actually. You're right. That's a Tom Hiddleston role,
right?
That's who we want you to be. We want you to be James Bond.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you very much.
So that could happen.
Okay.
We'll see. But the other thing is that you've been making sort of idiosyncratic choices that were not obvious, like Hank Williams.
Yeah.
Which, some people criticized you, and some people didn't think that was the right thing to do, but it turned out to be a brilliant choice.
It's part of it. Honestly, is part of testing myself. I always wanted to be the kind of actor that that could move, that could move, didn't stay in one lane. You
like a challenge.
I like a challenge, and those actors who have challenged their own expectations are the ones I think I've admired the most. I think Ralph Fiennes is a tremendous actor. I do think he has, subverted people's expectations of him. I think Daniel Day-Lewis has done it since the moment people became aware of who he was. Kenneth Branagh's a huge inspiration. Nobody expected him to direct Thor, and he directed Thor. I think if the dream is to keep surprising the audience and also yourself, because I think that's where the most interesting work is. I think you don't want to stay in one vein.
So you're keeping things open for what you're going to do?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's good to. The Night Manager was appealing because it did feel tailor-made in some way. It felt very, it felt like a good fit instinctively at the time. But then as I grow and change, and who knows what's going to feel like a good fit in 5 years' time, what's going to feel like a good fit in 10 years' time, and I think that's how that's how any artist, really, any creative person wants to be. The form might change, the stories will change. Something happens in your own life, and you want to reflect that in the work, or you get an opportunity. And the reason I wanted to play Hank Williams is music is a huge part of my life, in a way that I don't think anyone particularly knew about. And the idea that I could make a film about music and its power to sort of transform and be transcendent in a way, to bring people together, which is what his music did. I think great musicians have that occupy a unique place. So you think of this year, we lost David Bowie and Prince, and they were kind of beacons that stood for possibility, and people found them inspiring simply because they showed everybody that there was no one way to be. You could be many different things, and music has that unique access, I think. And I think Hank had that access, so I was just excited by that chance in a way.